Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. This is a new book. It is May 4th, 2020, and the world is still in lockdown. It doesn't look like that's going to turn around or we're ever going to get back to normal, because it is devastating to many businesses, which provide about 80-90% of the jobs around the world, if you think about it. And the governments are borrowing $2 trillion, then $2.2 trillion, and then another couple trillion. And in the news today, they were going to borrow $3 trillion. So that's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9.2 trillion. They're talking about an economic collapse. They can't pay that money back. And I think it's all about bringing us into some prophecy. Dividing the world up. I got all these pictures and maybe some kind of spiritual or biblical explanation. I've been reading this book. Daniel reveals the bloodline of the Antichrist by J.R. Church. The bloodline of the Antichrist. So I've been reading this and also combining that with the other book reviews I've done for 6+ years or 10+ years, and the research since 2005 and the books I've read. It seems like it's getting clearer and clearer to me. As crazy as the answer is, I suppose if you don't take it seriously and do a lot of work, you probably couldn't wrap your head around the whole thing. Nobody wants to believe in the boogeyman or the ghost or the demons. They want to laugh at you and say that doesn't exist. Even though when you see the movies and the TV programmings and the corporate logos and the symbols on the dollar, you know, why do you have a reptilian eye on the dollar? Why would that stuff be on the dollar? Is the dollar some kind of game? Is this some kind of art? And they have the all-seeing eye with the pyramid on the federal buildings also. And so much more. I've been making videos and exposing this, but I've been reading this book. So I thought I would share a little bit and see if we can come to some conclusions. All right, had to take a second there and make an adjustment, but I'm going to start reading from this portion of the book. Oops. Come on. The Empire of Babylon, 627 to 638 BC. So how far back in history can most people think about, know about, compare to what's going on today? Seriously, how far back in history can people think about and accurately talk about? I suspect most people can probably analyze the past 100 years, World War I, World War II, 9/11, and now the worldwide lockdown. Because a lot of people don't dwell into history and research. But other people who have studied the Bible might go back as far as, for Christians, 2,000 years ago with the birth of Jesus Christ. And then the Jesus being crucified on the cross. And if you're into other religions, Judaism or Zoroastrianism in Iran, you might go back 500 years or 1,000 years before Jesus was born. You might go back 3,000 years. But if you're a scholar, somebody who really has looked into this, you might go all the way back to the Great Flood, Noah's flood. 5,000 years. So if you go back to Noah's flood, you have to contemplate, wait a minute, Noah built an ark and survived the flood. So there was a reality before the flood, and apparently God or the angels or whoever advised Noah to build the ark and get the animals and his family and prepare for the great flood. And apparently prior to the great flood, they were building monuments all over the world. Machu Picchu in the Andes in South America, the Great Pyramids in Egypt, and monuments like this all over the world. This civilization that existed prior to the Great Flood. And apparently, if you read Genesis in the Bible, the reason that God created the Great Flood was because, and I know this is going to lose some people, but let's talk about it. It's in the Bible, it's in books, there's monuments. There were these God's angels or God's children or godlike beings who disobeyed God, whoever God is, and found the humans, the women, attractive and mated with them, mixing their godlike DNA with the DNA of us humans, and the offspring were these monsters and giants, sort of what you read about in Greek mythology. And apparently there are books, I've gone over some of those books, that there have been giant skeletons found all over the planet. So apparently this genetic manipulation of humans with other beings existed prior to the Great Flood. And if you read other books, you'll find out about Atlantis, Lemuria. See, you can dig into this stuff and find out a history that goes back 12, 18, 24,000 years. These advanced civilizations. And in the Pacific, over here where my hand is, Lemuria sinking. And over here in the Atlantic where my hand is, Atlantis sinking. And you can see behind me that if you push the continents together, it looks like a big puzzle going together. And if you read the biblical Genesis material, it says that way back then it was all one landmass, and that the air was different. It wasn't like sunshine and rain. It was a perpetual mist. And if you go back to Lemuria and Atlantis, the physics of the whole thing was even different than that. People had greater spiritual abilities. They could control nature. They could control a seed in a plant and make it grow right before somebody's eyes. So again, a lot of people don't want to understand that there's more to our reality than what we know, what we were taught in school. Most of us just went about our business, want to go about our business, and live our lives, raise families, accomplish what we want to accomplish, grow old, and I guess eventually die. And it's been going on for thousands of years, generations and generations. Nothing new here. But through all those generations, there's a lot of documentation of interaction with otherworldly beings. Call them demons, call them angels, call them serpent beings, whatever. It's in the hieroglyphics in Egypt. It's on the pyramids in Mexico, the Mayans, and down there in the Andes and South America. All over the world are these monuments and symbols to this otherworldly existence. So if you can wrap your head around that and say, okay, Rick, that's the truth. And you look at the world today with the worldwide lockdown, and you put it into the context of all of that, of the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, World War I, World War II, and 9/11, and the lockdown today, and all the economic collapses and all the overthrows of countries all over the world. And if you go back 1,000 years, the 300 years of crusades by the people here in Rome, getting all these countries in Europe together and marching over here to where my head is, Jerusalem, right above my head, Jerusalem, all of the Arab area, Turkey. You can see Turkey in blue, Saudi Arabia, Iraq in yellow, Syria in brown. You can hardly see Israel, which was Palestine. You can see Egypt, Libya, and all those countries where the leaders were toppled and some of them dragged through the street, killed in a very horrific way. But 1,000 years ago, they had 8 crusades from the European area over here into the Middle East, destroying and looting the place. So that's 1,000 years ago. And so you move forward, there were all kinds of other events. But if you go back 1,000 years and go back further than that, and you get into the ancient kingdom of Babylonia or Egypt and Moses and further back. So they have all these religions. That's what I'm trying to say here. And what I want to read is about the Empire of Babylon, which was 627 to 538 BC. So about 500 to 600 years prior to Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago. So let me read this and try to throw in my 2 cents and tell you what I've discovered here, and try to give you a synopsis of what it means to me, what I think I've discovered. Anyways, Gentile domination over Jerusalem. And of course, you got, according to the Jews, you got 2 types of people. You got the Jews and you got everybody else. And everybody else is a Gentile. Which makes me wonder, how can that be when you talk about China and Russia behind my head, Australia over here, Indonesia, all these islands with all these monuments of ancient times in Indonesia. And you know, then you got over here the Peruvians and the Brazilians and the Costa Ricans and the Mayans up here and the American Indians. But apparently anybody who's not a Jew is a Gentile. So again, it makes me wonder, how can this one small group of people over here in the Middle East, calling themselves Jews, and if you read Revelation in the Bible, it says Jews who call themselves Jews but are not, but are of the seed of the serpent, the synagogue of the serpent. So now you narrow it down to the whole world are humans, and above my head in this little tiny dot, you have these serpent people. The seed of the serpent is Satanism, magic, sorcerers. So now it makes a little bit more sense. And Revelation in the Bible 2.9 and 3.9 says that. Jews who call themselves Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. So now I can understand that the Jews, and I'm confident that all Jews are not Satanists, and all Jews don't even know this. Just because you were born into a Jewish family, you may not want to be a serpent person. But I may be wrong. Maybe there is some kind of DNA that makes them different to be a serpent person. And there's a lot of accusations about shapeshifters and serpent people. But I kind of believe, because there's a lot of Jewish people who have written amazing books exposing all the shenanigans and deception going on. So I don't think just because you were raised in a Jewish family, or maybe you were a Jewish man or a Jewish woman, and you married a Christian or an Islamist, an Arab, or maybe an Asian or an American Indian or Brazilian. So would that still make you a serpent person or a Jew? And according to the people immigrating to Israel these days, if you don't have the purity, they won't allow you to immigrate. So they are trying to get the Israel to be a 100% pure Jewish country. And if they're checking, I guess, their DNA, and I just wonder, are they checking for some kind of symbolism or DNA serpent seed? And that's kind of bizarre. But when I read from this, maybe it's not so bizarre. There's a serpent on this book. Daniel reveals the bloodline of the Antichrist. There's the serpent. So maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I have eyes and I can see, and I have ears I can hear. I have a brain I can think. But this, I think it has something to do with where we are today, and the things that have happened that a lot of people know about in history for the last 100 years plus. And so it might behoove us to contemplate it and see if we can make sense of it. So the Empire of Babylon, 600 years before Jesus' birth, 627 to 538. Gentile domination over Jerusalem began with Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. So King Nebuchadnezzar, or Nebuchadnezzar, pardon me when I say his name probably wrong. I've been shortening it to just calling him Neb when I make my notes to myself. So Neb was the king of Babylon, and he had a dream. Why did the dream not begin with the earlier Babylon under Nimrod? So prior to Neb, there was Nimrod, or with Egypt and the pharaohs. Why Neb's Babylon? Because this prophecy is about God's judgment on Judea. It has no relationship to the general failures of mankind. The whole emphasis about the times of the Gentiles has to do only with Israel's violation of the law of the sabbatical years, Leviticus 25 and 26. So apparently when God gave the Hebrews, they weren't Jews back then, the land of the Canaanites, where Israel is today, he said you can grow crops for 6 years, and then on the 7th year you're not to grow anything. You need to let the soil and the ground regenerate. But I will make your crops in the 6th year very abundant, so that it would last you 3 years. And then after you do not farm the land for 1 year, you can farm for another 6 years, and then don't farm for 1 year, and then farm for another 6 years, and don't farm for 1 year. And that was called the sabbatical law. But apparently the Hebrews, after 100 years or so went by, decided to do away with that, breaking God's law commandment to them, so they had to be punished. So apparently God, through a prophet of King Neb up there in Babylon, told him to go down there into and Babylon is where this yellow is, where Iraq is, where my finger is. So he had to go down here to Judea and destroy the temple and kill the people and take a lot of them into captivity because they were breaking the laws. And in Jeremiah, it says because they were sacrificing their sons and daughters to the demon god Baal or Moloch. So we get past one paragraph here. All right, God began with Babylon because it marked the exile of the Jewish people and the desolation of the promised land. However, God promised that this Gentile domination would not be permanent and that Israel would rise again at the appearing of the Messiah. So from the head to the toe, this is a story of foreign domination over Jerusalem. So there's this story that the dream that the king had, and he couldn't figure out what the dream was. So he had to call on all of his magicians and sorcerers and prophets, and he said, I had this dream, and if you know anything about dreams, you forget your dreams, usually. So he had this dream, it really disturbed him, but he woke up and he couldn't remember it. But he felt it was very important, so he called all of his sorcerers, witches, magicians, prophets, and he said, I need you to tell me what my dream was all about. He didn't want to admit to them that he forgot. He just assumed that they were witches and sorcerers and prophets, that they would know if they could see into the spiritual world. But of course they couldn't read his mind, so they couldn't help him. But apparently when the Lord sent him down to Judea to destroy King Solomon's temple because they were disobeying God's laws, he had taken some of the Hebrews prisoner, and one of them was Daniel and his family. And Daniel was a very articulate, intelligent man, and he learned about what was going on with the king and all his sorcerer magician advisors. And the king was going to have all those magicians and sorcerers and prophets beheaded and killed. And Daniel, in prison with the other captive Hebrews, told the guard that he wanted to talk to the king. So he talked to the king. He said, hey, I can help you figure out what your dream meant. And Neb said, wow, tell me. He said, well, I need a couple days. And Neb was a little irate, but Daniel convinced him. I'm giving you this short story here. A lot of people don't have the time to go to the long story and read line for line. But anyways, Daniel, again, very bright young man, 25, 30 years old, very intelligent, Hebrew scholar. He said to Neb, give me a couple days, give me till tomorrow, and I'll solve the problem. So Neb went back to the prison with his 3 family members, 3 other men, and they got on their knees and they prayed. And apparently an angel appeared or whatever and told him, okay, this is what it's all about. Here's what he dreamed, and this is what it means. So what he dreamed was of a statue. And the head of the statue you see here is made out of gold. And then you have the arms. You see the guy crossing his arms. It's made out of silver. And then you see his waist is made out of brass. And then his legs are iron. And his toes are clay. So he had this dream of this being, a big metal statue, I guess, with the head of gold, silver on the arms, brass on the waist, iron on the legs. So it's an interesting story here. So Daniel told Neb that your head is the gold. You are the gold. You're the beginning of time that is in your dreams. You are the ruler of the known world. But your kingdom will perish. And then Persia will become the ruler of the world, Iran now. So that's silver, lower than gold. And then Persia will relinquish control of the world to Greece, and we all know about the Greek Empire that extended all over the world, and it's made out of brass. And then the legs were made out of iron, and Greece fell, and Rome took over the world. And you can see there's two legs. And Rome divided into Constantinople over there on the Mediterranean, a faction of Christianity. And of course the Roman Catholic Church, another faction of Christianity, hence two legs. And the legs are long. So those two kingdoms were going to last a long time. And then you get to the bottom of the clay feet. And that's where we are today. So the dream, and you can look this up, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and you can click the link on these pictures and get all the details. But I thought I would explain it. Anyways, the 10 toes on the bottom is called the New World Order. And the world will be taken over like with the world lockdown right now. And the world will be divided into 10 areas according to the dream. And I got maps of that. And so the world will be enslaved, a global world order divided up into 10 segments. And you can go on Yahoo image site and you can look up the different maps of the world being divided into these different sections. This is what's prophesied. I'm giving you the short story. Apparently in the United States, they've already divided up into 10 segments. You know, if you're in area number 4 with Florida, you won't be able to cross into zone 6 in Texas. And if you're in zone 6 in Texas, you won't be able to go over to zone 9. It'll all be complete lockdown. Get it? Lockdown. The United States. So the whole world will be broken up, and I guess all the different countries will have their own breakdown. So that's Neb's dream, and that's the history for the past 600 years. We had the Babylonian kingdom, and then you had the Persian Iran kingdom over here. Right here is Iran. And then you had the Greek kingdom, and then you had the Roman kingdom over here, Europe. And today, of course, you have the whole world, the 10 toes. And apparently, when the world lockdown and everybody gets actually enslaved, freedom is gone, and everybody's forced into this mystery religion of Babylon religion, apparently that's the fulfillment of prophecy. And I hope I made this simple enough. You can go through the Bible and spend a long time to get through 2,500 years. I like to make things a little simple. So anyways, when the prophecy is fulfilled and the world is divided up into the 10 toes, after the Roman Empire has fallen, then apparently a rock will come from the sky and destroy the 10 toes, or the world as we know it. And we know there's been a lot of talk in the news about a pole shift or an asteroid or Nibiru or all this crazy stuff. Somebody's preparing for something. But that's the prophecy. You can see the stone there. Crazy story. So that tells you right there. You can go on Yahoo image site, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and there's the destroying rock in the kingdom of Christ. And you can look on the other side. The top is the head of gold, Babylon. Then Persia, Iran, and the Sumerians and the Assyrians, the empire. And it tells you the years. And then you have Greece, and it tells you the years. And then you have Rome, and it tells you the years. And then you have where we are today. And there, in a nutshell, is the prophecy from the dream of Nebuchadnezzar 2,600 years ago. And prior to that, God had told him through his prophets to go down into Judea. Remember, he was in Iraq, where my finger is here, Babylon. And he had to go down and destroy Jerusalem. Even though King Nebuchadnezzar was a Baal worshiper, B-A-A-L, a demon, and sacrificed animals, hopefully not humans, to the demon. But I think I show pictures where they actually feed children to the demon Moloch and demon Baal. So apparently they were this religion of mystery religion of Babylon. They sacrificed humans to this deity. Why God would call upon Nebuchadnezzar to go down and destroy Jerusalem, because they were sacrificing their sons and daughters to the demon god Moloch, and apparently not abiding by the Sabbatic law of every 7 years, etc. So they were turning away from God. So God had them destroyed. But God told them through the prophets, you're going to have to pay for the 70 years of not following my commandments by being in prison for 70 years, and then I'm going to have you set free, and you're going to rebuild the temple again. Well, apparently, as we all know, around few years after Jesus was crucified, after the year 2000 ago, the Romans, Titus, destroyed the temple again the second time. And the prophecy has it a couple thousand years later, they have to rebuild the temple for the third time. All right, back to the book. So now when I read from the book, you got the whole story. So God began with Babylon because it marked the exile of the Jewish people and the desolation of the promised land. However, God promised that the Gentile domination would not be permanent. So I told you when the Lord sent Nebuchadnezzar and his armies to destroy Jerusalem and the temple, it wasn't to be for forever. It had a certain number of years, something balancing with how many times they didn't obey the sabbatical law. So if they didn't honor the not farming anything for 70 times, they would be in prison for 70 years. The 10 toes make up the kingdom of the Antichrist. So that's where we are today. As we all can see plainly, the symbolism all over the world, whether it's Hollywood movies or corporate logos and symbols and on the dollar bill. It's the mystery religion of Babylon, apparently the mystery religion of the Antichrist. So the symbols on the money, the symbols are the Washington, D.C. street plan. The owls are everywhere. Moloch and Bohemian Grove. I've showed this in videos again and again and again. I don't think anybody can deny that this crazy mystery religion symbolism and promotion of anything other than the religions around the world, not Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or Islam, but this new one world religion they talk about, this new one world order, this new one world currency. It's here. And of course, you know, at some point, they need to push the whole thing along. Maybe they get tired of being impatient, trying to trick us with terrorism or sustainability or global climate change or global cooling or pole shift or global warming and all these things. It just wasn't getting the job done. With all the propaganda and school shootings and trying to disarm us. I'm just thinking outside the box here. So they had to push the program into high gear and shut down the whole world. And we know once they get total control, the whole thing gets destroyed. Okay, back to the book. On the other hand, Nebuchadnezzar's famous city, with its hanging gardens and colossal tower, certainly offers us a connection with Nimrod's ancient Babylon, the mystery Babylon of the future. So this mystery Babylonian religion that started this whole thing with Nebuchadnezzar and the dream, the mystery religion, will be come into full bloom again. And we all know through the movies we see on TV and the activities that they promote that it seems like if the evil ways, destroying the planet, however you want to call it, destroying the family, it looks like Mystery Babylon is in full gear all over the world, as apparently mentioned here in this book. Okay, so it says here, therefore we should be aware that Nimrod established a religious and political culture that formed the concept of a centralized government. Is this not an amazing story? All right, continuing on. I hope you're following me. I've been reading this for the past couple days. Quite the story. You like it when you find a book that pretty much puts the whole thing that you've been wondering about, trying to figure out, into something that explains the world powers for the past 2,500 years, and Nebuchadnezzar's dream and how it all ends. And all these pictures and these websites on Yahoo image site, they plainly have all these situations of how they're going to divide the world up. The post-New World map. And I did make a video on 1984 and the dream of the author of that book about the 3 super states, Oceania being America. So it looks like you can readily find that the whole dream thing is being put in order for the 10 toes fulfilling the bottom part of the prophecy in the past 2,500 years. Okay, so Nimrod's Babylon revived an adulterous pre-flood religion first mentioned in Genesis 6, where certain sons of God, here we go. So you want to figure out, what would this serpent seed be? Who were these beings who mated with humans that created the giants and the monsters we all know about in mythology? So in Genesis 6 in the Bible, it says, certain sons of God descended to the summit of Mount Hermon and lived for a while among men, taking human wives and producing giants. So I suppose, I don't want to be crazy here, but if the scientists today, and there seems to be a lot of mad scientists out there, they've done a lot of work at bringing us all these deadly viruses and biological weapons and microwave weaponized transmitters and so much more. But getting back to this book, back then when these otherworldly beings with a different kind of DNA mated with humans, the offspring were giants and other kinds of monsters mentioned in mythology. And again, where I was going with that conversation, if these mad scientists who control our world today were to try to mix human DNA with, let's say, animals, you could imagine if they got something to live, it would look like a monster. And weirdly enough, off of Long Island, there was this island, small little island off of Long Island, New York, where apparently they had a laboratory and they were doing these kinds of genetic manipulations. And on the shores of Long Island, from this laboratory on this little island offshore of Long Island, these grotesque monsters periodically washed on the shore. Just part of the stuff I remember in my research over the past 15 years. So apparently they are into this. And even in the Bible, not in the Bible, but in Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book, I made book reviews on his books, and I mentioned this, to eliminate the opate, volume 1 and volume 2. And to eliminate the opate means the belief that gives you comfort. So they need to eliminate people's religious beliefs because it gives them comfort and safety and maybe even protection from God when you pray. So these evil people had to eliminate the opate. And it can also mean taking a drug to soothe you if you're not feeling good, opate. but apparently praying and believing and getting comfort from God through the hardships of life is called the opate also. So anyways, in his book, Hitler regime, apparently, in Hitler's diary, is they had this young lady laying on an altar, and on the next altar they were sacrificing a Jewish, I'd say a gypsy Munich man, a Munich gypsy, excuse me. And Rabbi Marvin Antelman was a high-level Jewish person, the leading of the Jewish Congress in the United States, by the way. No small guy. So anyways, he in Hitler's diary, they killed the gypsy Munich man in Germany in a ritual with the young lady laying on an adjoining altar to bring about a spiritual being into that room to impregnate the young lady laying on the altar of this cult, the Thule Society, Vril Society, whatever you want to call it, so that she would get impregnated with this demonic spiritual being and be some kind of super Antichrist leader for the world. Well, anyways, according to the diary, the being did appear when they sacrificed the gypsy, but apparently it did not impregnate the young lady. That was not a success. Thank goodness, probably. But that's what the diary says anyways. So back in Genesis in the Bible, these God's sons were taking human wives and producing giants. In addition to the biblical account, several ancient sources mention these Nephilim, including Rabbinic literature and the Zohar and the Book of Enoch. So the video I made prior to this one talked about the crown, the Queen of England, and the Nephilim and all their evil activities. So it's so weird when I continue to go through these books. I get these common denominators. But, you know, I have about 2,000 books. And I don't really ponder which book I'm going to do next. I kind of trust my intuition. It's like you go to, if you have 2,000 books, you have about 10 bookcases with 4 or 5 shelves each. And I just let myself be led. I ponder for a little while, what should I talk about next? And it seems to come to me, which is a very important thing to understand, because it says in the Bible, ask and ye shall receive, search and ye shall find, seek and ye shall find. And so anybody watching this video, if you're really concerned, and you should be, about reality and what's going on, and you've been deceived and diverted away from God and all of that, and following the evil forces, if you ask yourself or ask God, talk to the air, I don't care, and say, hey, I want to know the truth. And apparently, you too will have these coincidences, and things will just pop into your reality. I believe that, including watching this video, listening to me. Nothing is an accident, in my opinion. And if you don't believe me, go ask the astrologers. Anyways, so in the Bible, they talk about the offspring of the God people, God's sons, creating the monsters, including in the Rabbinic literature, the Zohar, and the Book of Enoch. I've made videos on the Book of Enoch. God incarcerated these fallen angels in Tartarus, a subterranean abyss or bottomless pit. And that's in Revelation 9-1, 2. So even in the Bible, it talks about these fallen angels mating with humans, creating these monsters, and God incarcerated these people in the bottomless pit. Now think about that. And think about when you leave the planet. Where's your desired destination? What plane do you want to get on? One taking you soaring into the heaven, or one that's going to crash into the bottomless pit? Just saying, this stuff is a bit serious if we all have choices to make about our behavior and our souls and everything. I'm not trying to be a preacher. I've been learning this stuff as I've been going along, and making these videos to share what I have learned. It's been a bizarre trip, I'll have to tell you. Anyways, back to the book. So their human offspring were destroyed in the flood. So apparently the reason we had the great flood, and Noah had to build an ark, apparently this is what had happened. And apparently, regrettably, after the great flood, the more of these fallen angels came to earth. And at first there was only 200. But after the flood had killed all these monsters, and remnants of humans were saved all over the planet, even in the Hopi books by Frank Waters, it talks about some beings saving the Hopis to go into underground caves. And over there in Romania, they found these caves. And all over the world, in the Andes Mountains, there's these caves. So some high-level spiritual beings helped remnants of people, not just Noah's Ark, survive the Great Flood, who were the people who repopulated the whole planet after the Great Flood. But anyways, according to my reading of this book, after the Great Flood, more of the fallen angels showed up on earth and interbred with certain tribes of people, creating some kind of different kind of, call it serpent DNA. And, you know, David Icke and other people have talked about shapeshifters. And apparently this is where you get the UFOs and aliens. These beings, when they come into our reality, can take different forms and can mate with human beings, creating human-like characters. And apparently these might be the elite royal families who have been controlling our world, using humans as fodder for wars and disposable people and slaves and all kinds of perverted activities. They have been among us, and they have been making life on earth a literal hell in many instances, like World War I and World War II, and French Revolution and Russian Revolution and Chinese Revolution, and so much more economic collapses, depressions, recessions, and assassinations, and imprisonment, and torture. These people are mentally ill. They're not human people like you and me. That's why the 1%ers control everything. They have a different intellect, a different intelligence. They know more about reality and how to deceive us, so they can be the 1% who uses the media and all of the lies and deception and continuing to cause these different things to happen. Boom, 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 shootings, bombings, terrorism attack, 911, economic collapse, and these different events, so that we never actually get on our balance and have time to think. That's why they want the economic chaos. They don't want us to be able to organize and think. So they perpetually bring on these situations that shakes up the whole world. And nobody can put it together or talk about it or think about it and see what these evil culprits are up to. Back to the book. However, Genesis 6.4 indicates that another group of these fallen angels descended after the flood and continued their abominable practices. They also established a form of worship known as the Canaanite religion of Baal and Ashtaroth. Baal religion? And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, last year, the year before, didn't they put those archways of Baal in New York? It's a doorway. An archway of Baal in New York and London. And then I found out through UNESCO they were putting 1,000 of these archways of Baal. And what I'll do is I'll go take a look at Yahoo image site and put the archway of Baal and make a little clip, which I'll attach right after I stop the video on this clip, to show who's in charge of our world and the religion they're into, which is mentioned in this book. Why would they put an archway, a doorway, a religious demonic symbol in New York, in London, and 1,000 others all over the world 2 years ago. And there was a lot of uproar. A lot of people knew what was going on. So what is this religion of theirs that controls our world, puts it on our money? In 1933, when the United States went bankrupt, they took over our money. They took over our world. So watch this clip about the Archway of Baal, mentioned in this book as one of their religious deities and that they worship. So, in ancient times, in ancient Babylon, the deity that they worshipped was Baal. B-A-A-L. And it says over here on the right, Baal worship comes to America. So over there in the Middle East, this would have been the original, or one of the original temples to this Baal entity. Looks like Washington, D.C. they erected the Arch of Baal for display. And this religion, they have to sacrifice humans to the demon god Moloch, you see here on the right. The Temple of Bel coming to New York and London. So they call it the Temple of Bel, or Archway of Baal, or the Archway of Palmyra. Altar to Satan and child sacrifice. New York City. People posing in London under the arch. The Arch of Triumph. Triumph. The unveiling of the arch in London. The Palmyra Arch being unveiled in Florence, Italy. So why are they doing this? The Arch of Baal return. We know that the powers that be are pushing for a one world religion, a one world government, a one world currency. And I showed you the prophecy of the Nebuchadnezzar, Neb's dream, interpreted by Daniel in the Bible, and the world being divided into 10 super states, which would be the toes of that giant that Neb dreamed of. And back then, they worshipped Baal, Bel, Moloch. And now, these days, they're putting up the temple all over the world. Apparently 1,000 of them financed by the United Nations. So why would they do that? Are they telling us something? Who would put up a temple to a demon that you sacrifice humans to? Unless they are, as prophecy tells us, resurrecting this ancient religion. Even like you can see here, I didn't know this picture was on the Yahoo image site, but they even projected the goddess of destruction, Shiva, on the Empire State Building. Why would they do this? There's an archway, Freemasonic. Is that telling you something? There's Moloch. They're feeding him a baby. Same thing in the Bohemian Grove, California, where our leading politicians and corporate CEO leaders, etc., have been photographed, and some very unusual stories and goings-on in the Redwood Forest in California, the Bohemian Grove. Alex Jones snuck in there and took a video. It was like a witches event, and screaming and throwing a baby into a fire under a giant owl, Moloch. So you got the archway being put up, Manhattan, Syria, London. Just saying. The gates of hell opened up wider in D.C. So I'm not the only one putting this together. So there's your archway of Baal. If you look through it, you see the Capitol building. And somebody else's website, you can click this picture on the Yahoo image site, and they'll tell you the gory details. There's Marduk, one of the entities that they worshipped. Somebody's putting that as an overlay on the archway of Baal. So who do you believe? And why would the United Nations, and it has to be quite expensive, put up 1,000 of these replicas all over the world? If you go to an Islamic temple, church, you're going to see Islamic symbols, Muhammad, etc. If you go to a Christian church, you're going to see Christian symbols. If you go to a Hindu church, you're going to see Shiva, Kali, and Hindu symbols. If you go to a Buddhist religious place, you're going to see Buddhist symbols. Why are they putting Baal symbols all over the world? Why have they been doing all the things they've been doing? It's a rhetorical question. Obviously, they're telling us something. The resurrection of Baal, Moloch, the golden calf ritual, the temple of Baal, Bel, coming to London, later to New York, occult analysis. Go on Yahoo image site, put in Baal archway, look at these pictures, click the links, and figure it out for yourself. Something is not good when you put up archways, which are portals. Here's one of the leaders of Britain. You put up a portal, an archway. Here's the Freemasonic symbol with the columns and the sun in the background. Arch of Baal goes up in Italy. You can watch these YouTubes. At nighttime, they light it up. So what is a archway? It's a portal. What comes through a portal? Apparently, as you see in this picture, a demon. What does prophecy tell us is going to happen on the end days? The last part of Neb's dream, when the world is under lockdown and divided into 10 sections, the 10 toes. These are the beings that are supposed to arrive and take control. And according to Bible, the days will be shortened, and it will be a short event when we have this world takeover, because if God didn't shorten the days, there would be no humans left alive. So the story goes. They had this being here, the Satan statue on the left, erected in Oklahoma, and then the citizens there was a big uproar, so they moved it to Detroit and had a weird witch-type celebration in the streets. And here's another demon on the top left, and this crazy horse occult symbolism at the Denver airport, and a symbol here of the gods up in heaven on the bottom right. The Temple of Bel. You ever had been to an event called Bel Share in your downtown? They were worshiping or celebrating a holiday for these characters. 13 days of preparation. Occult significance, April 19th to May 1st. April 19th is the first day on the 13th day of Satanic Ritual Day relating to fire, the fire god Baal, or Moloch, or Nimrod, the sun god, also known as the Roman god, Saturn, Satan, devil. This day is a major human sacrifice day, demanding fire sacrifice with an emphasis on children. This day is one of the most important human sacrifice days. and as such has had some very important historic events occur on this day. So what do you think is in line for our future? If they need to sacrifice humans to these demons, and they're putting up the symbols everywhere. Again, a rhetorical question. It doesn't take a genius to say, OMG, this can't be good. New York City, Archway of Baal, Palmyra, September 19, 2016. Mr. Cohn here, I guess is a rabbi who's written several books telling about the harbinger. I found out later on that Khan, C-A-H-N, means prince. So this Jonathan Cahn is pointing to the harbinger of Baal. Khan means prince. So this guy's a Jewish prince. And he's pointing out the significance of what they're telling us here. The harbinger. This is a warning sign about the future. A harbinger. You click the link on the pictures, you can read about it. The New World Order forming under pagan temple of Baal Arch. Breaking Israel news. Latest news. So what do you know? What do you believe? What does your brain tell you? What does common sense tell you what's coming? If we're all under world lockdown, and apparently they're not going to just reverse it, how can they get all those businesses started? And unless people take a vaccine or some kind of mark of the beast, all the prophecies are coming true. Anyways, I'll end this video with this little clip, and probably do another video from the book and discuss this further. Thank you for watching my video. Please leave a comment below and copy the link to other people. I would say that this might be serious. This might be even urgent.